Welcome again to Walking Through Acts. I say again, some of you may be joining for the first time, but this is episode number 40. And so some of you, maybe many of you, have watched the previous episodes. If not, they are online to be viewed if you wish to go back. But we are now in Acts chapter 26, verse 24. Acts chapter 26, verse 24. And to permit you a moment to locate that, if you wish, to read along when I read out loud, and also just to set it up a little bit because we're in the middle of something here, let me just say this. When we left off last time, the Apostle Paul was speaking primarily to a man named Agrippa, King Agrippa, Herod Agrippa, and his wife Bernice. Also Festus, a Roman governor, was there, and others maybe too. And he is in Caesarea, a Roman outpost on the Mediterranean Sea of Israel. And he has appealed to Caesar. That was a Roman citizenship right, and he had exercised it. As a result, though, I say as a result, in connection with that, Festus, the presiding governor at that time, at this time that we're reading, wants to send along some information about what this prisoner is being sent to you for. So he's hopeful that by speaking with King Agrippa being more Jewish background than Festus, might have something he could pick up on or learn that could be included or said or written to help make it look more plausible what was going on here. Now, this is the next thing I'm about to say is my thoughts along this line. This is God's providence. God had, I say it's my thought, I don't mean totally. I picked up on it from Scripture, but God's ways are not our ways always, and this is a way that Paul is going to go all the way to the top, we'd say, in speaking before governors and kings and even possibly Emperor Nero, for that matter. Would be as a prisoner. And you don't always have access to the higher ups, but in this case, as a Roman citizen and his right for appeal to Caesar, he would. And so, anyway, he's wrongfully been incarcerated, being falsely accused. But a lot of his persecution, Paul's, was not rightfully due him. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say basically all of it was not due him. People persecuted him wrongly. Okay, and one more thing, and then I'll read some more. When we left off, Paul had made a speech, and when we start reading here in verse 24, Festus will interrupt him, so to speak, or at the end of his talk, blurt out something, and that's where we are, and that's about what you're going to hear as I read. Okay, so it's chapter 26, verse 24. Now, as he thus, that means Paul, Paul, thus made his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, "Paul, you're beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad." And Paul said, "I'm not mad, most noble Festus, but speak the words of truth and reason. For the king before whom I also speak freely knows these things. For I'm convinced that none of these things escapes his attention. Since this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you do believe." Then Agrippa said to Paul, "You almost persuade me to become a Christian." And Paul said, "I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today might become both almost and altogether such as I am, except for these chains." When he had said these things, the king stood up, as well as the governor and Bernice and those who sat with him. And when they had gone aside, they talked among themselves, saying, "This man is doing nothing deserving of death or chains." Then Agrippa said to Festus, "This man might have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar." That's the end of chapter 26. A couple things to comment on here before reading on into chapter 27. There's nothing being supplied in what Paul is saying or interrogation is revealing that would give it more grounds for having this man sent to Caesar. It's going to look really strange, maybe, what it is they attach to the reasons why he's being sent there. Um, Also, Agrippa makes this comment. Now, how true it is, I don't know, but he makes a statement. If he had not appealed to Caesar, he would have been set free, or may have been set free. I sort of doubt that, but nonetheless, it is an interesting statement that he makes. I don't think Paul's problem is, oh, you made a mistake. You shouldn't appeal to Caesar. No, I don't know that. It was he was going to be assassinated if he didn't. Is about what it amounts to, and that's previous readings or studies in Acts. Go back a couple chapters for that. But anyway, uh, one more thing too. He makes an interesting statement. Well, I say he. First of all, Agrippa does, and then Paul's response is interesting too. Agrippa says, "You almost persuade me to be a Christian." Now, I wish I knew the tone of his voice when he said that. Sometimes the tone or inflection or the manner in which something is said reveals the heart as best you can tell the heart of another by their words. But we don't see that in writing unless the writer says, like for instance, Luke, who writes this, said Festus said with a loud voice. Okay, well then I know that's the way he said that. But when Agrippa says what he does when he says, "You almost persuade me to be a Christian," did he say that sarcastically? Almost you persuade me to be a Christian. Like, ah. Or is it sincere? Almost you persuade me to be a Christian. And it's one of those things we'll just have to wonder about and not know. Uh, Now, Paul's response, though, is good too to talk about. I mean, it's good to mention, and that is that he indicates, "I wish you were not just almost, but altogether." Everybody here, not just you, everybody, just like me, except for these chains, of course. You know, he wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I wish you were not almost, but altogether a Christian. There's a well-known Christian hymn, "Almost Persuaded" is the name of it. And some of you are familiar with it, maybe. It's often sung at near the end of a service to invite people to obey the gospel. And "Almost Persuaded," I'm sure based on this here. Okay, reading on. Chapter 27. We're near the end. I don't think we'll conclude today. I know we won't. Just not enough time to conclude, but we're right near the end of the book of Acts. There's only 2 more chapters remaining, 27 and 28. And so let's begin 27. I'm looking at the clock. Oh, yeah, we've got a few more minutes here today. And whether we finish next time or not, at least we'll be moving in that direction. I'm not hurrying, but walking through Acts. Walking on into chapter 27 now. "And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy," when it says we, I'm stopping right here to point out we should sail, that includes Luke. "And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy," that's where Rome is, of course, "they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So, entering a ship of Adramyttium, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coasts of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. And the next day we landed at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul kindly, gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea which is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia or Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. When we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmone. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lacia or Lacia. Lacia, I'm not sure about pronunciation. Verse 9. Now when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster, and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. When the south wind blew softly, let me just stop there. If time permits, I'll keep reading. If not, it'll be next time. Okay, this is sometimes referred to as the last journey of Paul, or the journey to Rome, the imprisonment, imprisonment of Rome journey, whatever it might be referred to as. Okay, just quick review here, and this is a wonderful description by Luke of even the details of travel. I'll just pick out 2 or 3 things. They take out sailing up the coast. They stop at a city, Sidon, on the coast. Tyre and Sidon were Phoenician cities on the coast there in Sidon, and there were brethren in that vicinity. And the man who's responsible for Paul trusted him, it would appear. You're not going to run off and escape and not be responsible about returning to the ship, right? I don't know how the conversation went, but it is observable by Luke, who writes this, that the man gave Paul kindly treatment. That's in verse number 3. And he could be with some of his friends and receive care. But then they went on up the coast, we'd say, just off the coast, sailing around near to Cilicia, Pamphylia, and then, of course, crossing over, we'd say, towards Cyprus. Actually, that's in verse 4. We put to sea from there, and we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus. The winds had a lot to do in those days without motorized shipping. A lot depended on winds and prevailing winds, and at the time of season even, what were the winds, and or as we will see here in just a second, I'll just go ahead and mention it now, where are we going to winter? They're not going to make it all the way to Rome in a few weeks. It'll be over a number of months. In fact, winter will be spent, at least intended to be spent, on the Isle of Crete, or in a harbor of the Isle of Crete. Anyway, just 1 or 2 more observations, and that is they move along. They make their way to past Cyprus, or going through to Crete. And their first place of stopping at Crete was not the best for wintering in, and so they were wanting to go on around when winds would keep them pushed against the island, close to the island, to another place. What was the name of it? I think it was called Fair Havens was the first place, and then they were heading to Phoenix, it says, verse 12. They didn't make it. Wind changed. Paul, most likely not because he was an expert mariner, but because he, I'm going to think, had God's providence on the matter, knew that they shouldn't go any further. They should stay here. Men have free will, but it's going to be advisable we stay here. We're going to lose the ship. We're going to have disaster. We'll lose lives. It'd be preferable, but they listened to people other than Paul, and I can sort of understand that in a way. Unless Paul had a lot of background in shipping and sailing. And anyway, they decide to go on. The problem is, as they get out to sea a little bit to move along the coast, the winds change and blow them away from the island. And that's where things get real troublesome. I think I'm going to stop here. This is a little earlier than I might sometimes. The reason being that is when I'm just actually going ahead right now, giving you a little preview, and instead of going ahead and starting the reading, which talks about the great violent tempest and storm they run into, and the eventual shipwreck and such like off the coast of on the coast of Malta, all of that will be the next episode, episode 41. So let me just stop here. In verse 13, we'll resume. As I was just previewing, they set out to go around Crete to another harbor open toward the southwest that they felt would be more advantageous for spending a few months there in Winter Harbor. But they don't make it there because the wind, we'll see right away, the wind turns and blows them away, and they can't get back to Phoenix, we'd say, get back to shore. And so they have to let the ship go out into the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. All right. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening today. And if you can and wish, please join next time as we read about that shipwreck of the Apostle Paul.